I'm very delighted to introduce Yaromir Steiner. Steiner founded Steiner & Associates in 1973 with a vision and passion of creating sustainable, pedestrian-friendly, high-performing mixed-use destinations. I think he single-handedly invented the modern town center, going all the way back to Cocoa Walk in Miami. And he's most notably known for Easton Town Center in Columbus. If you haven't been to Easton, it's worth the trip to Columbus, Ohio. And it's the pioneering town center that proved these centers work in cold climates. And I'm going to stop there and let Yaromir get started.
Click.
You're going to have to use this.
Okay.
It's short. Okay.
Good morning. Sorry for delaying your lunch by 15 minutes. Accent, I was born in Istanbul. Stefanos also from Turkey. Lived in France many years. My education is French, and then I came here about 30 years ago, and I live in Columbus. It's a long story. First, I would like to warn you about a couple of things. Contrary to many urbanists who approached, urbanism from a residential perspective, I approached it from the very beginning only from the retail perspective. Frankly, Bob and I are among the few who approached the business that way. So for many years, we were the odd guys out trying to see how do you do a general store of 10,000 square feet in the middle of a 10-minute walk with retailers who did not exist. But slowly, progress was made. So first, I'm coming from a retail background, and that impacts what I'm going to say. Because I started from the retail background, I had to do projects where the retail made sense. I could not do like Stefanos' friend, the developer, who does a residential project, who makes money, and then who gives away the retail component or subsidizes it or supports it so that other people can come and activate it. I had to make my money from retail, and only from retail. Part of this separation of uses where we all specialize. So that's another prejudice I have. I look at it from how do you survive starting with retail. The third warning I would like to give is that because of that, the kind of projects I do are very specific. The projects where retail makes sense by itself and might not apply or will apply to what we're expecting for. The needs are very wide in the United States for introducing retail, now mostly in mixed-use environments, and my experience might not be totally relevant, but I will give you what I've learned over the last 25 years, and I hope it will help with your efforts in creating retail in urban environments. So what makes urban sustainable? I mean, creating sustainable urban retail. So first, what do you mean by urban? Literally located in a city, characteristics and so forth. I mean, you know what the dictionary says. New urbanism, on the other hand, thinks of it as pedestrian friendly and all integrated in that urban or mixed-use fabric. From a sustainable standpoint, again, the definitions are there, I'm not going to read them. But from an new urbanist definition, or the purpose of this presentation is how to create a commercially successful without ongoing subsidies. That is, retail that can survive on its own right, that doesn't require subsidy either initially on the capital side or later from an operating side. If you can combine those two things, that is the urban as defined earlier and sustainable, then you have a viable retail component that adds to the energy of the urban fabric you create. Well, so this talk is about this, how to create those environments. First, I would like to, for those who are not in the retail world, it's important to maybe address a little bit the classification of retail environments. There are many classifications, like for residential. Obviously there are for sale homes, there are townhomes, there are attached homes, there are apartments, and there are, I'm sure, with Stefanos' transactions things, there are many, many different kinds. In retail, it's the same way. There's a classification, the regional center, the neighborhood centers, the community centers, the power centers, the outlet centers, and so forth. But I would like to offer to you a different way of looking at this, because it might help you better to understand what you need to do in order to create those successful environments. So we'd like to organize them by the nature of the shopping trip, rather than by size or division. So I would like to speak to you about need versus want-based retail environments, and need and want-based shopping trips. Need-based shopping trip is the first dollar of every household. It's the basic spendings. Every household has need-based spending. If you need to eat, you have needs, and you have to spend money for them. There is low variability based on income levels. That means between a household who is, say, a $60,000 household and a household who is 3 times bigger, a $180,000 household, the need-based expenditure don't triple. If a $60,000 household will have $55,000 worth of needs, a $180,000 household might have $90,000 worth of needs. So need-based expenditure is more constant between households. The third criteria for need-based expenditure, they are rational criteria. I mean, they are driven by rational criteria. That means that you are trying to get the most dollars, the most goods for your dollars. And every decision you make on need-based shopping is based on, trying to, again, to be very efficient. And there's a high frequency of visits. I mean, since the first dollars go there, we need to go to these need-based environments all the time. And so, on the other hand, a want-based shopping trip comes from the excess dollars of some households. I said not every, we can say every, but in a 30,000 household, a want-based expenditure could be a few $100s because the needs come first. So these are the discretionary spending or the additional dollars. We are very variable between households and economic circumstances. You can imagine how a 60,000 household might have want-based shopping, which might be $5,000 a year, whereas a 200,000 household might spend 50,000 want-based shopping, 10 times more. So the income might triple, but the want-based expenditure might go 10 times over. The decisions for want-based shopping are mostly driven by emotional criteria. We can replace the word emotional by other words, but it's not always rational. That is, these are things we don't need, these are things we want, and our wants, can be very subjective and very arbitrary. And there's a lower frequency of visits because obviously those dollars are not as common, and you spend them less often. And so if you compare those two experiences in summary, based on the trips, need versus want, I mean, you can see first dollars versus excessive dollars, rational decision criteria versus emotional, and higher frequency of visits in need-based environments than in the want-based environments. So let's talk about need-based shopping environments. Need-based shopping environments are more locally targeted. And I mean, it sounds obvious, right? I mean, every household has needs, so there has to be a need-based environment every place there is a household. These are the retailers who provide value for the dollar. That is, rationally is the best deal. You can get a burger for $1, or you can get a burger for $15 at Smith & Wollensky. And a need-based environment obviously is the one which is the cheaper one. Then convenient local access. In need-based environments, those shopping environments have to be close to where people live. It has to be easy for them. They have to be able to get to them very quickly. And their design has to be functional. It's about efficiency again. We are going to get bread and milk and need to be able to get to them quick and to be able to get out them quick also, and be able to get what we need. So a want-based shopping environment, on the other hand, has regional trade areas, and the reason why is because out of, say, 100,000 households of this trade area, there's maybe only 20,000 who have significant dollars to spend on want-based shopping. So you need to cover regional, bigger number of households to get enough critical mass of dollars, of discretionary dollars. The retailers are more, you remember the previous one, they were effective, cost-efficient retailers. These are more experiential and aspirational. You can buy an iPhone at Apple, you can buy the same iPhone at Sam's Club for 10% less. It's the same good, but the transaction could be need versus want. And then convenient regional access. Before we were talking about convenience of access in the neighborhoods, now we need regional access, because if you are draining from a bigger trade area, we need to have people to be able to come to your location. Now I would like to make a point on this. A want-based environment is not always gigantic. A want-based environment can be smaller, but it has to be accessible from the number of households you need to be able to serve it. For example, a need-based environment can look to almost every household, within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I mean, every household served a need-based retailer. But in a want-based environment, you may need more households to satisfy the retailer. So then your access is to be convenient to your whole trade area, which creates regional access, boulevards or freeways or whatever it takes, depending on the size. And the design of those environments are more aspirational. I mean, I would say, I say that jokingly, but in a need-based environment, you need German architects. In a want-based environment, you want French or Italians. Because efficiency is the key for need-based, but for want-based, you don't have to go to those places, so it has to feel right. And obviously, I mean, Stefanos would qualify for Italian or French. But so we need environments that are attractive and where the customer experience is important. So summarizing the same thing, I mean, you see local versus regional, but regional being relative to the scale of the want environment. It can be the same size as the need. When you are living in a very wealthy neighborhood, then your need and your want can have the same trade area, because every household who has needs has also wants, and that's then the ideal combination, which that many retail developers seek. Then retailer, value versus experiential, local versus regional, and then functional versus aspirational retailers. So there may be developers in the room, so let's look at the financial model. In a need-based environment, the need-based retailers, your rents are based on the sales of your costs. Target, we saw pictures of them earlier, Walmart, Best Buy, a grocery store. These retailers are very, very strict. They know to the penny what their building costs, what they expect from the developer. They know how much land the developer needs to buy, how many parking spaces it will cover, and they pretty much have an idea about how much the developer is allowed to pay for the land. And then, based on those numbers, they will say, we'll pay your rent to give you an 8% return on your total costs. Because we know that when you sell that shopping center without lease on it, you can sell it for maybe a 6.5 capitalization rate, and we give you 150 basis points between the 8 and the 6.5 as your profit. And then that margin changes. Walmart will give you maybe 100 basis points, and then others will give you more room. But it's all fixed. They know your costs. They are involved in every detail of what you do. And if some exceptional location require exceptional costs, then they will adjust their rents accordingly, but it's again based on your costs. And those retailers like long-term leases. They like at least 10, 20-year leases, and very often they will want options. Another 10 or 20 years behind that, when you sign a lease with a Walmart or a Target, you commit yourself for 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years with all the options in line, on those deals. In general, their credit is better in those kind of tenants. They have better credits. And then, and the management of those shopping environments, shopping centers or otherwise, are mostly focused on our financial management. I mean, you collect your rents, you distribute them to your owners or to your REIT, and then your expenditures are very controlled, and the capital expenditures are in general very predictable, because essentially when you own a Walmart or a Target or a Best Buy or a grocery store, well, you may need to redo the roof every 20 years, fill the potholes every 2 years, replace the shrubs. I mean, your capital expense is very predictable looking forward. If you look to a want-based financial model, the rents are based on the tenant sales. If you go to Forbes project in Somerset, right? Yeah, I mean, if you go to their project, for example, and that's a big regional mall, their rents Nobody cares about how much the mall costs. The rents are entirely based on the sales of the merchants. It's a percentage of their sales. More sales they do, more rent you can charge to them. And they do. The leases are shorter term. In this kind of, one-based environments, the leases are about 10 years long, typical. Sometimes shorter, but 10 years, I would say 80% of the cases, no options given. Basically, the landlord will not give an option to the tenant beyond the initial 10 years. Except for restaurants. I mean, there are some exceptions for that. The credits are lower credit. I mean, although most of the tenants, you know, I mean, the Targets, the Victoria's Secret, maybe not, but J. Crew and, I mean, Pottery Barn and, I mean, all those kind of tenants actually are very, very low credit tenants. Their credit is not strong. The way you have comfort is by their quantity. I mean, even credit tenants like something like Limited Branch with Victoria's Secret is a weak credit compared, for example, to a Marshall's or compared to a pharmacy chain. So there are very few strong credits in the specialty tenants. And then the management who owns those projects, their focus is about the experience delivered to the customer, because it's not about, you know, minimizing or just making sure that the asphalt has no potholes. An experience has to be delivered, and the customer has to want to come back to those environments. So the focus of the management is not financial like the previous one; it's very much the customer's experience and satisfaction. And finally, there are ongoing capital expenditures, because these kind of environments have to be responsive to the aspirations of the customers and the want-based customers whose need, I mean, food is rational, but wants are not always rational, and they change. They change all the time, you know. And I mean, some of my colleagues reminds me that of the say 100 tenants in the mall 30 years ago, today, if you look, there might be 10 of them who still exist. 90 of them may be replaced by other tenants. The needs change all the time. You need to continuously renew, reinvent yourself in order to be responsive to those aspirations. So if you compare the two kind of projects, you know, basically, you know, cost versus sales, determining the rents, longer leases, stronger credit versus weaker financial, and then limited capital needs versus ongoing and sometimes unpredictable. So, I'm sorry. So if you look at those things, I mean, I like that as an anecdote. If you buy and own, you know, need-based shopping centers, it is like you invest into bonds. You are buying bonds, very predictable, better credit, you know, long-term, predictable income, not much upside. You know, the options are very limited upsides and so forth. But when you get into the want-based shopping environments, then it's like purchasing stocks. Because in that case, the upside is very, very unlimited, but the downside the same way. The credit is weaker, and it's a different kind of product. And if you look at the financial markets, the companies who own need-based environments, like, you know, who owns power centers, grocery-anchored projects, and these are REITs like Kimco, like Regency, like Weingarten Realty, I mean, companies like this, well, the way they alleviate the risk or mitigate the risk is by quantity. That means they own hundreds of those shopping centers. It's like when you own a bond portfolio, you diversify your bonds, you ladder them, you organize them, and that's the way you own those kind of projects. On the other hand, if you go to want-based environments like Taubman, who is a REIT who owns, you know, basically malls, almost exclusively want-based malls, or recently Simon, who is shedding the rest of their portfolio, or GGP, General Growth, who separated their weaker product to focus on the want. These are acting like stocks. I mean, clearly these REITs are like stocks. So that's why sometimes in the financial markets there's always a question, is a REIT, you know, runs with the bonds or with the stocks? Well, it depends what REIT. You know, and if you want to have a REIT that operates like, has the upside of stocks, then you have to focus on specific REITs who focus on retail, which are based on sales and their volume. So now, so a need-based, what is the community approach or the community relationship of a need-based shopping environment? Well, in this, a need-based shopping center is really like a part of the basic infrastructure. I mean, it's not any different than having schools in the area, having, you know, proper street, utilities, garbage collection, and so forth. That kind of retail, that's a need-based retail, becomes part of the basic infrastructure that every community needs. So, I mean, obviously now you start thinking, you know, when you want to put retail in your environments, you know, if you're going to go that route, that's one method. If you're going to go the other route, it's a different method. And most of the marketing in those environments is done through their anchors. You know, in a need-based environment, the advertising is about how you can get a gallon of milk for, you know, a penny. You know, or you can get 2 cartons of milk or whatever. But it's about price mostly, and most of the advertising, the attraction that brings people to the area is the anchors appealing to your rational sense of saving money. Advertising, the emphasis is on price. And the goods and services satisfy basic needs. I mean, you need to provide basic needs for people in those environments. In a want-based environment, in a wants-based retail environment, those environments respond to the discretionary aspiration of the community. Those projects or that retail environment shapes and defines the community. I mean, like Birmingham, I mean, clearly the retail environment in this community defines the community in a certain way. Also, that it's a two-way street. Very seldom a need-based shopping environment will define a community, but a want-based environment will define a community, will impact it significantly. Marketing is done through all the tenants. Every one of the tenants is a player in a want-based environment. Every one of them. I mean, some people go to this kind of environment, they want to go to Lululemon, or they want to go to Pottery Barn, or they need to go to Victoria's Secret, or they want, I mean, they are very specific, or Eddie Bauer. I mean, there are specific needs, and every one of them is an anchor, and their advertising is not, you know, typically based on price. And the advertising emphasis is on event and experience. You know, when you market, when you promote an environment who is want-based retail, you are trying to talk about the experience the environment delivers. It becomes more, you know, what happens downtown Birmingham, what happens in my project at Easton, you know, is what happens is as important as what the retailers are selling. And the goods and services in general are aspirational. That is, they are responsive to the, you know, aspiration of the consumer, and the aspiration not being always rational. So if you organize them from a community standpoint, need versus want, I mean, you understand that then want-based components are basic infrastructure versus aspirational. And, you know, and if you want to impact the community's perception from the outside, the bringing in a want-based component is very important. And a want-based component can be, you know, 2 restaurants, a cafe, and 3 retailers, but they are a certain type. And versus a need-based one, which is basically providing that basic need, you know, making it possible. And then, I mean, you can read the rest of the, and those, I mean, that slide presentation, I can make it available, you know, later online, so you don't need to write everything down. I should have said that earlier, maybe, yeah. So how do you create, now this is my prejudice comes in. I can answer some questions on the rest, but I create want-based environments. That's what my company does. I don't do need-based environments, so what you will see from now on is going to be how to create that want-based environments, and that's why I warned you at the very beginning, I create retail environments that have to make money. So I cannot rely on the residential to pay for things. So automatically then I migrated to a certain type of developments who allowed me to do that, and some of those things might be out of scale for what you are thinking about or what you need. I mean, again, I will be more than happy to answer questions, or you can send me emails, I will respond, but I can share with you what I have done. So how do you create those environments? Select sites with regional access, but the caveat I gave earlier is still true. Regional depends on the scale of the retail environment you are trying to create. If you are going to create a want-based environment, which is made of 3 restaurants and 8 retailers, then obviously regional access means enough access, enough households to feed that business, so then regionality relates to it. It doesn't have to be on a freeway. My 2 examples are all on freeways because this is where I did them. One of them is in, yeah, both of them, yeah, Cincinnati and Columbus are shown on these maps, freeway intersections. And I don't know, yeah. So, and then, you know, then the second thing is, the important rule is this. When you are looking at introducing a want-based retail environments, you have to look at the feasibility of that retail component independent of the non-retail real estate uses that you might be developing if you're a mixed-use developer. Don't think that because you have 150 units or 200 units on top of your retail, then that will magically make that retail work. If you start running numbers, I mean, you can run numbers yourself, 200 households, I mean, they spend $10,000, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, it's going to generate, say, $2 million. That's not enough sales to justify maybe more than one store. So if you want 8 stores, clearly there has to be more market than what you have. That is one thing. I mean, I also teach a class on mixed use, and in a mixed use environment, the one use that has to be studied independent of another about its feasibility, I don't mean the geometric look, the environment that the rest creates, but from a pure business standpoint for them to make money or not, that's the one use. You have to look at it independent of the rest. The residential gets enhanced by good retail. The hospitality gets enhanced by good retail. Offices get enhanced by good retail. But retail does not get enhanced by the rest unless there's a huge scale, then obviously it's different. But if it is typical projects like we are talking about, 20% of the retail or 10% of the retail of the total building area, you have to look beyond that. So you need to establish the feasibility of your retail component on its own right. That applies also for need-based retail. Then you have to select retailers who are responsive to that, I mean, to those aspirations. Obviously you can mix and match. That's always the big question. Can you put need and want at the same place? Well, that's putting a very cool, say, bar restaurant, in a building next to, say, CVS pharmacy. Well, you can, but it creates different challenges because the accessibility, the parking, the in and out, are different criteria. And some of them are not compatible. The pharmacy wants easy access, easy out. Well, he doesn't want the restaurant to take all those parking spaces because they're also easy to the restaurant. A restaurant goer who is going to spend an hour and a half in a restaurant can walk, say, 3 minutes to the restaurant, but someone going to a pharmacy for a 5-minute in and out will not want to walk more than 30 seconds. I mean, the length of stay determines the distance of the parking to the retailer, and if you start putting 2 users who have different needs, I mean, the space of one can be cannibalized by the other. So, in general, you put the same kind together, whether it's need or want. And if you're in a want-based environment, then you have to try to select want-based retailers. You have to create a balanced leisure time component. This sounds odd today, but for all of us, those who are old enough remember, 20 or so years ago, or maybe 25 years ago, you had never had food, you never had leisure time uses, in retail environments. For those remembering the old malls, the cinema was always on the opposite end of the parking lot, so that, it didn't interfere with the people going to shop in the mall. The restaurants, the term outlet or pads, started from there. They were just placed like a, ring of restaurants around the peripheral road. They were never integrated. Well, in a want-based environment, you need to integrate them. And I remember years ago when the cinema came for the first time, in Birmingham with Sherry, and no, who was it? But anyway, was it Sherry? Who did the cinema here?
Related.
It was related, yeah, okay, well, her father, yeah. When the cinema came to the street, it was one of those first early ones who saw the importance of a leisure time use to try to activate a want-based environment. And then the restaurants. Today you cannot imagine a retail environment, say your Birmingham downtown or city village center, without its restaurants. It makes no sense. But 30 years ago, these were totally separated worlds. So you have to have a good, balanced leisure time component. But by balance, you have to appeal to every price point and every taste. It's not only balanced by going from Italian to Turkish, but also balanced from a price point. You should be able to get the pizza by the slice, but also be able to get the gourmet pizza with a martini. So, and same for the burgers. You have to have a range of uses, and you should not be afraid of having, a bar, definitely an important use, and also restaurants in different price points, and quick casuals and so forth. But in a want-based environment, you don't want need-based food. That's why, what about the McDonald's? Where, if I want a dollar burger, do you want to create, do you do want them in an environment where you're trying to encourage longer stay and dwelling time and so forth. So, I mean, you can have quick casuals. This is the $10 meal. I mean, if you want fast food is $5, quick casual is $10, $12, and then you go to the sit-downs. And you can have quick casuals and sit-downs. That's an important component. And the cinema, by the way, cinema uses not anymore the old cinema. I mean, with Coke and popcorn. I mean, you have to move now to the dine-in theaters. I mean, the cinemas deliver an experience which is beyond watching the film at home. In 2 years from now, films will be available the same day on Netflix and in the theaters. So, because that's happening, any cinema who doesn't do more than just showing the film, is condemned to fail. And then you have to accommodate retailers' geometric criteria. Many non-retail developers think that you just put the apartments and then underneath there is some space, 10-foot ceilings, and you say, okay, that retailer will take that space. It doesn't work that way. Some retailers are more flexible than others. In the big boxes, for example, Target is an example, who is a special division for urban targets. But even smaller retailers, I mean, they have their requirements. I mean, you're not going to get, if you try to get Victoria's Secret, for less than maybe 6,000 square foot at a minimum, 8,000 more normal. So to try to be 2,000 square foot and dream that will be Victoria's Secret, I mean, you're wasting your time. So you need to understand the type of retailers you're trying to attract, whether they are gourmet grocers, whether they are wine stores, whether they are restaurants, whether they are retailers, and give them the scale and size of spaces they need as you are conceiving your environment. And then design, create an urban environment. I mean, obviously it sounds obvious here among this crowd, but it's very important that the externalities of the environment are very important, because this customer is not coming here because he needs to. He's coming, or she's coming, because she wants to. So you need to create environments that are properly designed. And then obviously, I mean, coming from a retailer, now we are doing lots of mixed-use projects, so we want to encourage the non-retail users, hospitality, apartments, I mean residential, condominiums or rentals, or offices, and I can tell if they are fellow developers that any non-retail use in those environments are extremely profitable. The rents, we both discussed those numbers many times, but 20% would be the minimum premium on rents in environments that are integrated. Hotel occupancies or RevPARs could be 15-20% above their peer in their marketplace. And offices, the elasticity is tighter, but occupancies get better. There's a stickiness in office tenants in those environments. Stickiness, they still fight for the rent because they are a business, they try to remain within reason. But once they get used to that environment, it's very difficult for them to move to a suburban, parking lot surrounded office buildings. So they stay, and that's always the benefit to the developer. So want-based retail environments. So how do we create those environments for greenfield, or not so green, I said, because, I apologize, but I mean, one of my projects is, clearly greenfield. The one I did in Milwaukee was more of a brownfield, when I redid Bayshore Mall. But for placemaking, I cannot use the word Stefanos used, but you're right. I mean, the negative space geometrics are more important than building architecture. I mean, the negative space, the space between buildings is really what makes the environment. I don't want to say I don't care about architecture, but when Stefanos was showing the way he integrated those buildings, broken into pieces and so forth, it's all about creating the interstitial space, and that is what creates the environment. And I'm not an architect, I'm just a developer using architects, but I have learned that. The second most important thing, in our opinion, is the furnishing of the public spaces. Again, more important than the building architecture, because by furnishings, the thing you can touch. When you get outside this building, you see a square, there are plants, there are benches, there are bollards, even the material, the sidewalks, the curbs, the meters, and all those things you can see that fills the space, for us, is the second most important thing in creating places that make sense to people. I mean, fountains, these are pictures from my projects, yeah. And the other one is for large projects, and that might not apply, I mean, again, for those of you looking at one, but I do, you know, I mean, million and a half square foot projects. So when we take a large project like this, so what do you do for the public spaces? I use Olmsted Brothers language, you know, in Boston, when he designed Boston, the parks and the connectors, he calls them the emerald necklace, you know, the green spaces connected by green spaces. I call them in our urban planning a string of pearls. It applies even to a place like here, you know, where you cannot have just one single strong point and then let it die as it goes to the edges. You need to create multiple points, you know, I call those strings of urban pearls, who are connected, each of them as compelling as the other. And compelling doesn't mean size. Compelling can be detailing. Compelling could be, one could be a public gathering space, the other one can be a place more oriented to our children, the other one could be an urban oasis, you know, a very quiet park and a sculpture garden and so forth, but those strong urban points, you know, can be then connected to each other, and you can take them for very, very long distances, because one thing in retail world we have learned now, I mean, maybe we should have known always, is that the notion of one customer going in a mall or in an urban setting and visiting every store from one to another and establishing a limit for how long people can walk does not apply to retail environments. Think of Fifth Avenue in New York. You know, if you are going to Tiffany's or that kind of money, then you go to 57th. If you are going to Saks, you go to 42nd. If you are going to Macy's, you go to 36th. Very few people work from Macy's all the way to Tiffany's, you know, in one afternoon of shopping. And malls work the same way. I mean, in a mall, replace the word mall by shopping environments, work the same way. Typical number of stores visited is 5 or 6, shopped is 2 or 3, and people know where they are going and their parking proximity of where they go. So if you have an urban environment where you have only one pearl, and if some of your stores are away from that pearl, then people who shop in that environment never see the beauty of your environment. So it is important to have multiple strong points in design. This again, this apply maybe to our kind of projects in green fields. When we design them, you have to think about adaptive reuse over the long term. And you know, obviously, sometimes if you have to do residential on the ground floor because the code doesn't allow you or the market is not there, always design the first floor taller. So if one day you want to convert to retail, you can do it. We like residential construction techniques where the structure is independent of the partitions so that you can remodel units in the future. When we do office buildings, we do our second floors taller so that the second floor can be added to ground floor retail if you want to store retail tenants. I mean, things like that. And also when you design parking lots from scratch again, not in urban fabric, make them in such a way that they can be filled in the future, you know, in a scale that makes sense. I mean, this is maybe a repeat of something else I said. In mixed-use environments, retail helps the other users, and maybe because I'm a retail developer, I see the world that way. But clearly, retail helps animate environments, which clearly adds value, you know, to the other users. Residential users, premiums 25%. You know, hotels, RevPARs 20-25%, and offices, I call them stickiness. But even rent-wise, you get at least a 5% premium. And then, well, do not let non-retail developers merchandise or design retail space. I've come across too many projects where, you know, residential developers would come to us and say, how come I cannot lease that retail on the ground floor? Well, because, you know, I mean, they just don't ask proper advice from people like Bob to do it right. Now, my case studies, this is my history and might not be totally relevant, but I would like to give, I mean, some of them are very old. I'm amazed when Stefanos can quote 2006, 2009, 20 million here, 10 million there profits. I have to go back to, I do only a few projects a year because they are big projects, and that's one of the first projects. We did this project in Miami. That project, I mean, really made me discover and love retail. It was almost 25 years ago, yeah, 25 years ago, and yeah, it was in, then I'll talk about Easton. That's a project I did in Ohio, where Ohio State University is. And you should come and see it. And the third one is a project in Cincinnati, Liberty Center, which is under construction right now. So I want to just mention those, and I do not have small-scale examples like maybe Bob would have, but at least some of the lessons can be learned. Coco Walk opened 1990, as I say. This was like a 2-acre site, very much in the scale of what we are talking about. What was, and we built that project in Miami, before Miami Beach was famous. It's south of downtown, in a very bucolic kind of neighborhood. You can see the boats in the Biscayne Bay on the south side. The reputation of Coconut Grove comes from very, very old times, but this is where the Panama Clipper took off, the sea boats to go to Europe and through Africa. Coco Walk is at the 2-acre site. Here's an aerial view of the site. Very compact, the public space very small. This is a view, a night view in front, looking at it. Here's the layout, again, the little courtyard, and you can notice some of the things that Stefanos was talking earlier about, these are not massive buildings, they're all carved and chopped and, laid out in different places. And in 2 acres, lots of things are happening, but because the rhythm is broken, what are the lessons we have learned? Well, what we have learned is that leisure time uses are legitimate uses for creating want-based environments. That sounds obvious today, but getting restaurants, getting bars, this is a very, very important element, which until then was not obvious. You would never put a cinema next to a Victoria's Secret or a Bath and Body Works or something like that. We not only find out that that increased sales, but the first point was the unique point. Every time we develop projects, every developer looks, what kind of unique retailer can we put here so we are different from Somerset, that we can do things in our downtown. Very tough to do with retailers. You can, in some markets more than others. Like in Ohio, local retailers, very difficult to find. In South Florida, or old, rich, old money environments, much easier to find because there is enough inheritance, enough people who want to play with it, or as I say, the mistresses live in South Florida and they have nothing to do during the day. There's lots of reasons why you can find this kind of retailers. But typically, in the middle of America, like in places like Ohio, in Columbus in particular, New City, there is not that kind of retailers. People who attempt always either become national very quickly because they do something good, or they get crushed by the others. It's very difficult to beat retailers who get their goods at 10 cents on the dollar from China and try to do something locally. There are exceptions. But the area where we can create uniqueness, now that we can introduce leisure time, is food. Because every city in America has good restaurateurs. On their own right, they understand the market. They are local, they know what they do, and take those people and add to them a sense of placemaking, give them a sense of design, and you can create very unique venues and allow entrepreneurs to become, more successful in what they do. So the leisure time component from a restaurant standpoint is a very valuable way of creating unique retail venues. The problem is, like in my project at Easton, I created a first Italian concept. It's called Brio. We thought it, we put it in place. Then, 10 years later, it's a chain. There's all over the place. So much for local Italian restaurant. It grew up, and same with Cameron Mitchell. So in markets we try to create them, but then they grow. When we did White House Black Market, there was only 3 of them. Today it's a chain. It's not anymore unique. So it's kind of difficult to do. But remember again, the leisure time component is your opportunity to create unique venues. Parkings work well when you mix those uses. We learned, you can definitely have bars, restaurants, cinemas, and retailers at the same place. The open, well-designed, streets and open space are very helpful for those environments. Why is Easton open air? That was my point. Easton is open air, not because we just like to have an open air project, it looks nice. It's because if you want to have a significant leisure time component, that means restaurants, bars, cinemas, you have to create a place. Like in Detroit, you go to Greek Town. You don't go into Somerset to go out. You have to go to districts, to areas, to places, or like your downtown here in Birmingham, there are places. So in order to create that, you have to mimic the urban fabric so that those components can coexist. In a project like, for example, Easton, our leisure time component of restaurants, bars, cinemas do about $130 million in sales. So they're a very, very important component. So Easton is obviously in Columbus. Again, I don't want to bore you with all this, but when Easton came to the market was dominated by traditional malls. And what happened is many traditional malls are moving from want to need. It's very important to understand that. In the 1960s, 70s, 80s, when more malls were being built, the existential aspiration of the baby boomers was materialistic, acquisition of goods. So anything that sold goods in itself was aspirational. So all the malls were conceived as aspirational environments. Fast forward 30, 40 years, we are looking at them today. Today, some malls remain aspirational, like Somerset, but many other malls, you know them in the area, have basically moved from want to need because of lack of capital investment. They're not responsive. The way you identify a mall, whether they are need or want, is when you have an out-of-town person, would you take them to that mall? If you would take them, they are still want. If you wouldn't, then they are need. Basically, you go there because that's a close place to get a bra or a pair of jeans. You know, whereas, you know, environments like Birmingham, where I'm sure you would bring your out-of-town friends, or maybe even Somerset here, the powerful mall here, these are more want-based environments. So when we came to Columbus, you know, there were all kind of malls, and here's the picture in '94, and then today, you know, about 20 years later, you can see the woods, that lozenge-shaped woods had actually deer living in it when I first went there. And today, I mean, you can see the town center and so forth, very dense. I mean, this is the kind of design, but let's go to the lessons. I mean, come and visit us and come and see me. When you come, we'll take you to lunch or dinner. No, I mean, we always share. I mean, if you want to come, here is the picture of Easton. Easton is in Columbus. What you see in blue on that map, on the Ohio map, is the trade area of Easton. A trade area of a shopping environment is defined by 70 to 75% of its sales. So the sales of Easton come from an area which is 50 miles wide and 100 miles north to south. It's huge. Normally for a trade area, you show the map of the city. You don't show the map of the state. 28 cents of every dollar comes from those orange dots you see on the map. And because Easton, and Easton as a mall, who came after everybody else, does the same volume as the two other malls combined in town, because it's a want-based environment. It's a place where people want and even, you know, come and spend weekends. What are the lessons we have learned? Very quickly. Open air, I said that earlier, open air is essential for anchoring leisure time uses. If you want that kind of anchoring, you have to be in a streetscape, you have to be in an urban scape. Drivable streets have to be connected to the surrounding urban grid. The public spaces are now the new anchor. It's not the department store, it's your public spaces, the string of pearls. We again need architects to design shopping centers. I say that tongue in cheek because 30 years ago, what you needed is the attorneys of the department stores to determine to pick their locations, and then you need a corridors 30 foot wide to connect them to each other. And the only need for an architect was to design the entrance, you know, to the mall. We needed some architecture. Today, obviously, with these town centers, we have designed real buildings. And then, contrary to what people think, these projects are more expensive to operate. People think it's open air, no air conditioning. That's not true. Much more complicated. Liberty Center, that's a project I'm doing in Cincinnati right now. Again, regional access. Here's the kind of layout of the project. But what I wanted to show, hold on, let me see if I have this. I mean, this is kind of a view of the project. I don't know if I have another one here.
Just take a minute and describe the plan.
Yeah, okay, I will. I was trying to see if I could do it better, but the way the plan works, let me see if there's a mouse here. Okay, do you see my arrow here? Yeah, yeah. You see, look at the string of pearls notion, for example. That's a square, and I'll show you a rendering of this square. This is a public square, the urban square. This is if PETA comes to manifest for a manifestation, that's the square they will pick. This is where we have our concert. This is where we have our farmers market. This is where we have a permanent stage for concerts. It's kind of hardscape, a little bit like the Spanish Plaza de Armas. You know, it's a kind of this solid surface. Then you come to this square, and I'll show you a rendering of it also. That's our green. That's a place where there are fountains chopped up into pieces. It's where parents would bring their children. There are little frogs on the fountains, you push buttons, they spit, you know, and things like that. There are, you know, pergolas and, you know, swings and things like that. Then you come, I'm sorry, where am I? Oh, then you come inside the building. This portion of the building, that's a mall, if you want, two-story enclosed building. And here is the living room of the project. Living room, that is the ground floor of that space, I'll show you renderings, is like a living room. It's like the third room, someone mentioned in the book. That is the place where you go, there are leather couches, there are tables, there are gathering places and so forth. You can buy beer, wine, or a cup of coffee. There's a fireplace, there's a piano player, and it's kind of the public living room with little sitting areas. But the same space on the second floor of the space is what we call the family room and the dining room. This is where we have our food court, the food hall, restaurants, food uses, and so forth, and children play areas, but of the caliber of children museums. I mean, really things where kids can do, not just the plastic burgers you jump on, you know, but things that you can do physical, physics experiments, and, you know, it makes very interactive. So that's our third kind of pearl. And the additional things we did in this project is that this building here, I hope you have a good rendering of it, this is a building in the middle. This whole thing is a building. It's kind of in the middle of that space. The surrounding buildings are much taller. So that's a low building here. I show you in the rendering. What I did on top of that building, we created a park, which is kind of a meditation park, and with a chapel, which is that corner building. So it's probably the first developer-built church. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my arrow here. So there's the developer, maybe I can use this, okay. Yeah, I mean, this building here is the chapel, and it's available for different services, but also for weddings and things like that. And the architect for this is her, you know, from Chicago, the one who did Michigan Avenue for landscaping. So this kind of a view, and the view, I mean, the first park is kind of in this area. The second park, the family-oriented one, is here. This chimney stack comes from the area we call the foundry inside the living room, and the roof garden is on top of here. And one thing relevant to what Jim Norkis was saying, this is residential. This is residential. It's built on top of retail. I have no idea about HUD and all kind of stuff because I don't understand residential. All I do just top-end apartments so I can do whatever I want underneath, and it's all market. Same here. This is an office building with retail underneath. This is the cinema with retail underneath. This is a hotel and AC by Marriott, their new concept, you know, Antonio Catalan's chain from Spain. It's kind of Marriott's response to A-Loft with Starwood. So that's kind of this project.
How many acres is
this? This is on 60 acres, and it's about, the final density for the master plan is about 1.8 million square feet, and we are starting with 1.2. So there's 600,000 that will be densified as we go further. So this is the children's, the family park, the green. To the right here you see the entrance to the foundry building. Because architecturally it's designed like an old warehouse buildings with a roof put on it after the fact, and the stacks, the fake stack we put in. The family room and the living room area is kind of done with wood timber construction, like a leftover from an old building. And this is kind of the streetscape, and this is kind of the hardscape park, you know, where I told you would be the place for, I mean, there's also water features, but they can be shut and it becomes basically a solid surface. This is again the family-oriented park, and then that's it.
I'd like to take some questions with Yaromir. Thank you, Yaromir.
Yes.
Is there a stock minimum percentage for your eateries and your entertainment versus the retail? Do you have to have a certain amount of space in restaurants and a certain amount of theaters or some other kind of entertainment?
I mean, this is a difficult question to answer in the sense that if we are Birmingham, downtown, and we are trying to add restaurants, how much do we add is one way of answering it. If I do a project like this, I mean this Liberty project, what we do, we look at the marketplace and we determine the amount of food sales or restaurant sales we want to have in the non-meat-based category, no fast food, I mean everything above that. But in the above category, we also include all the discretionary, like ice creams and coffees and things like that. So we identified, and I mean, I would be happy to explain how, but a volume of $45 million. So we need to achieve 45 to 50 million where we feel we can deliver reasonable sales to the restaurants. Because if you do more than that, then you dilute the sales, and then since the rents they pay is based on their sales, then you cannot get the rent you need. So you have to make sure the size is right. So once we get to the $45 million, then you divide it, say, by $600-700 a square foot, and that gives you the size you need, about, say, 80,000, 90,000 square feet. And then you take 90,000 square feet, we have 4 categories: celebration restaurants, celebration with friends restaurants, family outing restaurant. We have a kind of different way, and then we try to fill the halls with those restaurants. In a project like this, the square footage represents, of the total retail space, represents about 10%. Of the non-anchor retail space, it represents 20%, 25%. In the back, Virginia.
Could you just briefly discuss your effort to try to incorporate housing in any of these projects?
Well, what happened is, again, I'm a retail developer, so I did not know any residential. So the first thing we did was, in a project I did in Kansas City, the first thing I did, I incorporated, I built some office space on top of retail, and I remember it was like 8,000 square foot on 3 levels on top of retail. I told my partners and the banks that was going to be office, but I knew it was going to be residential. And I not had any money for the finishes. And then when the project moved along, it was a $200 million project. That was a little, pimple, like $5 million. Then I went to my partners and I said, why don't we convert that into apartments, and spend a bit more on the inside. So that was our first attempt. And I remember the tenant underneath was Taylor. Because we were trying to experiment to understand, what do you do with the P-traps of the showers? I mean, I'm not a residential guy, so I was a bit concerned. Do they leak all the time? Then what happens to, unlocked merchandise underneath? How do we get in their ceiling to fix the problems? And then, how many elevators do we need? I mean, all kind of thing. And we did not put any restaurants because the smell issues are a problem too. So we did that. We learned from that a little bit. Then from there we went and did a much bigger one in Dayton. We did 150 units on top of, and we still did not, we were getting much more comfortable. The important things for us at that time, the 3 criteria I learned very important as a retailer to me was we need to have shafts through the apartments, every certain distance in the hallways, because you always need something, going to the roof. The second thing is structurally you want to separate the vibrating equipment on the roof from the wood structure if you use wood construction because of this heavy AC units vibrate. And the third thing is, and I have stuck to it from the very beginning, we are very, 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 very concerned about sound insulation between the apartments, because what we found out is maybe we are smart retail developers, is that the residential developers build cheap stuff, who don't last. It's wood, it starts squeaking and squeaking, and and we cannot have on assets worth $300, $400, $500 million, an apartment project of $30 million, to start attracting the wrong customers because it was not built right. And we identified, and I'm from Europe, so my thing was, it was not the countertops or the stainless steel appliances, it was the sound. That is, when you put hard surface on the floor, you should not be able to drop a marble and hear it underneath. And also, if you play your boombox for low frequency sounds, I do not want the neighbors to hear. So that was for me the most important thing, and it has proven us right over the years, because you want to create those apartments not seen as a transient lodging solution, but rather as a permanent lodging solution. And the one criteria that makes a huge difference is the feeling at home. So this has been kind of our learning. And then frankly, I did not have any of the hard issues that you are talking about, although right now with Stefanos, we are getting involved into some low-income housing in Columbus. I'm slowly discovering a whole new world I had no idea existed, is that the way we've been doing it, since we can get 20% premium on the market, so everything is market rent, and then we put retail underneath. And the way we did it on this project, and anybody considering, that might be an interesting maybe lesson for you. I will show you this, because what happens is when you do those projects, this project, what you are seeing on the drawing is 350 million, on this map. So what happens is, today, nobody loans, 250 million in Cincinnati. Doesn't exist. I don't know if they loan that in Los Angeles, but certainly not in Cincinnati. So what we had to do was, where's the button here? Anyway. Yeah, what we had to do, we decided that we are going to separate the non-retail components. So this building, it's a good example, has 150 units and has about 50,000 square feet of retail underneath. So what I did in this project, I took the footprint of this building, that is anything from the curb in. I did the same thing for the hotel, curb in, and the same thing for the office building, the curb in. And I find 3 developers one residential, one office, one hotel, and I asked them to develop that pieces. Now, it happens that I became the developer to do the residential because I want to do it. So I have two hats I wear here, one with my big partner, the $300 million retail project, and then one as the retail developer, residential developer on this. And what we do, we ask, say, let's take the hotel developer, we say, when you are renovating the hotel, we are also going to deliver us 20,000 square feet of retail. We'll give you a 99-year lease at, say, approximately $12 a square foot. Called dark shell, we call that in retail. And then the retail developer, takes that space, 99-year lease, and then adds the additional allowances, adds the facades, finds the tenants, leases to the other tenants at rents, gross rents were in the, I don't know, $40, $50 range instead. And I mean, don't think there's a spread of 35. You still have to put $150, $200 in the space to make them leasable. But so that's what we did here. And then we require that at the moment we transfer the land to the hotel developer, that immediately, and that's possible in Ohio, he creates immediately a condominium separating the hotel from the retail. In Ohio, we can create air condominiums, that's it before nothing is built. So that way, from the very beginning, in the financial model, he has two assets running parallel in the same collateral, but two different ownership. I mean, one ownership, but two pieces. And we as the retail developer have the right at any time, after, say, maybe the first 2 years, to buy the retail component at a predetermined price. And the predetermined price of buying back the retail component, it gives him the same margin of profit as he would get selling his apartment project, his hotel project, or his office project. So that has been, our experience. And one thing that we find out adds tremendously to the value, we amenitize a lot. I mean, it's not unusual for 150 units for us to have 5,000–6,000 square feet of, libraries, little fireplace sitting areas, bars, and things like that. And also the apartment complex is run like a vacation club. I mean, every month we take people to baseball games, and we organize Halloween parties, and we organize New Year's parties, and so forth. If you go to the lobby of the apartment, there's always photo albums of 2010, 11, 12. You can flip them and see people living there. And we also put in the leases of our retailers that, for example, a person living in an apartment has a no-wait seating in the restaurants. They come in, first table available. And also they would deliver to the apartments with a, say, 10% discount. We don't allow all the restaurants. That's a privilege to do that, but there has to be one of each category. I mean, we make sure there is a $10 pizza, and there's also a steak, from another restaurant, and so forth. So we are fully integrated, not only from a structural construction standpoint, but from an operating standpoint also. I'm exceeding my time here, so.
Well, that's very good. Anybody else?
When you're planning your string of pearls, so you plan your different areas first, your retail, your non-retail uses, and then insert the string of pearls to coordinate with your placemaking element.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
It was about your string of pearls.
How do you do that?
Placemaking element. Do you plan the retail and non-retail uses, and then?
Okay, the question is, do we introduce the string of pearls after we design the scope of what the project is, or do we start with the string of pearls? We start, it goes together, but we start the string of pearls, because the placemaking, impacts everything, so you have to start with creating, the places in your design, and then, be able to, then put the retail around it and merchandise around it. And I would like also to say, so that people understand, projects like this are absolutely not financially possible unless there is a public-private cooperation. A developer cannot pay entirely out of his own pocket for all the streets and the density and the garages, 1,500 spaces here, and parks and things like that. But when I say it cannot be done without public-private cooperation, so as a developer I say without public help, so they help pay things, but in return, the tax impact for them, the location of this project is that was zoned for a car dealership who doesn't pay state taxes, pays tax at the state level, not local level, that's all the car dealerships in Ohio, or could have been a Walmart. So, you can look at 10,000 square foot density, 10,000 square feet density per acre, big Walmarts and power center, or we can give them triple the density, with this kind of uses, and suddenly when they start running the fiscal impact on the community, not a fake one just to get away with it, but really you see what it does, then you can show that it really has a much positive impact on the community. And this is a place with no place. Liberty Township in Ohio, where it is, and it's nowhere. I mean, that's a village center, there's no village. I mean, so this suddenly created there for a community who had none, and that in itself is very valuable to them.
Anybody else? Okay, well,
Thank you.
Thank you.